One of the real weaknesses in the evangelical approach to reading Scripture is sort of the lack of imagination, a lack of playfulness in how we engage Scripture. And turning to our Jewish neighbors to understand how they have understood their own stories, I think really opens us up to the kind of creativity that the Bible not only invites, but probably really demands. And one of the most interesting midrashes comes in one of the most difficult stories anywhere in Scripture, the binding of Isaac. There was a famous rabbi, Rashi, who lived about 1,000 years ago. And I think in some ways, he really helps us to bring this story not only closer to home, but to open it up to some of the unexpected implications this story might be presenting us with.
There's this almost awkward, somewhat stilted, stuttering request that comes from God. Take your son, your only son, the son whom you love, Isaac. Even in Hebrew, this reads quite awkwardly. And perhaps that's why there's a very famous midrash from the Rabbi Rashi, who died in the year 1105. But he fills in the awkward pauses and imagines all of this as a conversation between Abraham and God. Take your son, says God. Which son, replies Abraham? Your only son, says God. Well, I do have two sons, says Abraham. Maybe you forgot about Ishmael. No, says God, I remember him. In fact, I love him dearly. I'm looking after him right now. I'm talking about the son you love. Well, I love both of them, says Abraham, as God stares back with raised eyebrow. So God responds, let's not play any games here, Abraham. It's Isaac we're talking about. Now, this kind of playful reading is interesting because I think it reminds us that sometimes what's not said is where the most important words lie in a story. Bobby did something like this earlier in the series. We have this moment where Abraham's father, Terah, dies. And it's only in the aftermath, in his grief, that God speaks and calls him to somewhere new. Well, what if it wasn't just in the aftermath? What if God had been speaking to Abraham all along, since his childhood? But what if his father, Terah, was an imposing figure, a bad dad, someone who took up too much space for a young Abraham to hear that divine calling? Now, is that what happened? I don't know. You don't know. But does that possibility, that question, perhaps open the story in new ways to allow us to see maybe our story reflected back to us here? I think it might. And so what Rashi is doing here is taking a story that can feel very distant from anything in my life, at least, and bringing it a little closer to home. Have I ever played favorites? Have I ever been partial in ways that were damaging to the people around me? Have I ever been confronted with the consequence of that? What this exercise is doing is helping us to place this story in the context of what we've already read about Abraham. Again, we've seen Abraham in dialogue with God. We've seen Abraham implore God to do what is right, and yet now, perhaps confronted with his own malfeasance, the way he has not treated his sons fairly, Abraham seems to shrink from the responsibility to confront God.